Today we will be taking a look at Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Before we begin though, I would like to draw attention to something. As far as I know of, this is the only video on YouTube dedicated solely to talking about this show. There were a lot of reviews on YouTube of the video game itself, whereas I'm sure people gave their opinions on the show, but to my knowledge, this is the first ever video on YouTube dedicated to talking about the Adult Swim show. Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, is an Adult Swim animated television show that ran from 2000 to 2007. However, despite the show only running for a few years, shy of a decade, Harvey Birdman only has 4 seasons with 39 episodes in total. In fact, the first season was released during half of the show's lifespan with only 9 episodes. The show stars a former superhero that had his own Hanna-Barbera show, now attorney Harvey Birdman. The show is about Harvey Birdman being an attorney for classic Hanna-Barbera characters. A few of his cases were Scooby-Doo and Shaggy having marijuana, Fred Flintstone being an alleged mob boss, the Jetsons suing the past for destroying Earth, and Johnny Bravo having a sexual harassment charge. Yeah, that last one I made up, but you get my point. The premise is actually very good. It's interesting seeing these former innocent Saturday morning cartoons being brought into the world of adult themes, not to mention a lot of comedic opportunities. Speaking of the comedy, it's pretty deadpan at first, but then becomes a mixture of deadpan and in-your-face. By the end, though, the comedy is only in-your-face humor. It's jarring, but I get it. Humor was changing over the decade. However, I prefer the dry and deadpan humor of the show much more. The seriousness of these cases about characters that are very much cartoony is funny to me. That's not to say there isn't any in-your-face humor from the beginning, but that is mostly revolved to one or two characters. Harvey's boss, Phil Kinseben, who is basically just Bullock from American Dad, which makes sense considering Harvey Birdman is basically just Stan Smith. And remember, this show came out 5 years before American Dad. Seven has one difference from Bullock, though, that I like. He laughs and then gives the audience some information. This is usually just used as a joke, but sometimes he gives character building information, which would normally be a bad thing because of the show don't tell rule of writing, but it fits his character. And an 11-minute show should have some character development each episode. This also helps because he is usually restricted towards the B-plot. Gosh, I swear this show has the rules of Ed, Edd and Eddy, where the usual bad rules do not even apply. The other in-your-face style character is former enemy to Birdman, but now court judge, Mantuck the Mind Taker. His character is too hard for me to explain. Just know he gets annoying later on because he's on the screen more and more. A lot of the humor gets sort of jarring, cringe, and sometimes annoying though. You have one character, Peteropotamus, whose joke is he's always gets caught having sex, is a pervert, and has a catchphrase, "Did you get that thing I sent you?" At the beginning, he doesn't have a lot of screen time and it's actually somewhat funny. However, later he really overstays his welcome because, as I said, he only has 3 character traits. They also, for some reason, try to make "Did you get that thing I sent you" a meme by making him obsessed with it.
I didn't send him nothing. I keep a very detailed list of things sent and or received.
Ugh. That's like the worst joke in the entire show. My guess for the reason of this change is because he was probably a fan favorite of the show whenever it was on. This is yet another show to add a main character to the cast, Seben's daughter, Judy, who is okay, and that's about it. The final character is Harvey's teenage assistant, Peanut, who is also just okay and has some funny lines. That's all I can really say. I'm kind of neutral in him as well, as I am with most of the cast. The worst character, though, without any doubt in my mind, has to be Gigi, whom of which is introduced very early into the show, and they must have learned from their mistakes with her because she only appears once in the second half of the show. She doesn't even appear in the series finale. Okay, so her character is basically everything wrong with modern Brian Griffin times 10. Yes, she is that bad and is my new least favorite character ever of all time. I'm serious when I say this, that I could make an entire rant video about her alone. That is how much I hate her. Not all the characters are bad or mediocre though. For example, Reducto, another former Birdman villain, now attorney. His obsession over shrinking and his paranoia is actually pretty funny to me. In about the middle of the show, he becomes a main character and Harvey's best friend, but rival in the courtroom. Unfortunately though, with the shift in comedy towards the end, he barely appears. Anyway, my favorite character has to be X the Eliminator, who is obsessed with getting the crest of Birdman. He's actually pretty much a loser and bad at his job. However, it's pretty hilarious to me. To go back to the comedy though, during the end, a lot of the jokes are callback to earlier jokes, and they just have characters appearing out of thin air and then leaving. No one acknowledges them being there. Them doing this is fine, but it gets confusing sometimes. Like in one episode where X cannot find Harvey and appears in the room with him to tell an earlier joke, and then in the next scene he's still looking for Harvey. Anyway, the show starts out with pretty cheap animation similar to that of Hanna-Barbera, which of course matches the characters pretty well. The animation is later approved and technically better, but I prefer the old style. The later style doesn't really do it for me. I don't think it matches the characters very well, and it just looks off to me. Take a look at Top Cat to see what I mean. The worst of this is with Quick Draw McGraw's lip syncing. He actually looks like he broke his jaw, which I know is a nitpick, but I just want to mention it. I don't think the show was really all that popular when it came out, considering I had only ever heard of it while flipping through the channels and watching an episode. I guess the whole AOL advertising in the show didn't help. Now I know the phrase underrated is thrown around a lot, but I would argue that Harvey Birdman, attorney at law, is, and this is coming from a guy that usually doesn't even like Adult Swim. I do recommend it if you haven't seen it already. However, I kind of think the show would be more popular today considering social media and the fact that people are used to cartoon parodies now. You could argue that it wouldn't be because the generation that uses social didn't grow up with these shows. However, I have one word to say about that: Boomerang. Now, it's true that over the years, Boomerang has just become Cartoon Network's equivalent to Nickelodeon's Nicktoon channel, but Boomerang was pretty popular at first as it let an older generation introduce their kids to shows they used to watch. I finally got around to watching this show and to give it some much needed attention. Remember to subscribe, follow my Twitter, and finally, thank you for watching.